This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Sea Fairies by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 7. The Aristocratic Codfish. The three swam slowly along, quite enjoying the cool depths of the water. Every little while they met with some strange creature, or one that seemed strange to the earth people. For although Trot and Cap'n Bill had seen many kinds of fish after they had been caught and pulled from the water, this was very different from meeting them in their own element, face to face, as Trot expressed it. Now that the various fishes were swimming around free and unafraid in their deep-sea home, they were quite different from the gasping, excited creatures struggling at the end of a fish line or flopping from a net. Before long, they came upon a group of large fishes lying lazily near the bottom of the sea. They were a dark color upon their backs and silver underneath, but not especially pretty to look at. The fishes made no effort to get out of Merla's way and remained motionless except for the gentle motion of their fins and gills. "Here," said the mermaid, pausing, "is the most aristocratic family of fish in all the sea." "What are they?" asked the girl. "Codfish," was the reply. "Their only fault is that they are too haughty and foolishly proud of their pedigree." Overhearing this speech, one codfish said to another in a very dignified tone of voice, "What insolence!" "Isn't it?" replied the other. "There ought to be a law to prevent these common mermaids from discussing their superiors." "My sakes!" said Trot, astonished. "How stuck up they are, aren't they?" For a moment, the group of fishes stared at her solemnly. Then one of them remarked in a disdainful manner, "Come, my dears, let us leave these vulgar creatures." "I'm not as vulgar as you are!" exclaimed Trot, much offended by this speech. "Where I came from, we only eat codfish when there's nothing else in the house to eat." "How absurd!" observed one of the creatures arrogantly. "Eat codfish, indeed," said another in a lofty manner. "Yes, and you're pretty salty, too, I can tell you. At home, you're nothing but a pickup," said Trot. "Dear me!" exclaimed the first fish which had spoken. "Must we stand this insulting language, and from a person to whom we have never been introduced?" "I don't need any introduction," replied the girl. "I've eaten you, and you always make me thirsty." Merla laughed merrily at this, and the codfish said with much dignity, "Come, fellow aristocrats, let us go." "Never mind, we're going ourselves," announced Merla, and followed by her guests, the pretty mermaid swam away. "I've heard tell of codfish aristocracy," said Cap'n Bill, "but I never knowed 'zactly what it meant afore." "They just made me mad with all their airs," observed Trot, "so I gave 'em a piece of my mind." "You surely did, mate," said the sailor. "But I ain't sure they understand what they're like when they're salted and hung up in the pantry. Folks generally get stuck up 'cause they don't know theirselves like other folks know 'em." "We are near Crabville now," declared Merla. "Shall we visit the crabs and see what they are doing?" "Yes, let's," replied Trot. "The crabs are lots of fun. I've often caught them among the rocks on the shore and laughed at the way they act. Wasn't it funny at dinner time to see the way they slid around with the plates?" "Those were not crabs, but lobsters and crawfish," remarked the mermaid. "They are very intelligent creatures, and by making them serve us, we save ourselves much household work. Of course, they are awkward and provoke us sometimes, but no servants are perfect, it is said, so we get along with ours as well as we can." "They're all right," protested the child, "even if they did tip things over once in a while. But it is easy to work in a sea palace, I'm sure, because there's no dusting or sweeping to be done." "Or scrubbin'," added Cap'n Bill. "The crabs," said Merla, "are second cousins to the lobsters, although smaller in size. There are many families or varieties of crabs, and so many of them live in one place near here that we call it Crabville. I think you will enjoy seeing these little creatures in their native haunts." They now approached a kelp bed, the straight, thin stems of the kelp running far upward to the surface of the water. Here and there upon the stalks were leaves, but Trot thought the growing kelp looked much like sticks of macaroni, except they were a rich red-brown color. It was beyond the kelp, which they had to push aside as they swam through it, so thickly did it grow, that they came to a higher level, a sort of plateau on the ocean's bottom. It was covered with scattered rocks of all sizes, which appeared to have broken off from the big shelving rocks they observed nearby. The place they entered seemed like one of the rocky canyons you often see upon the earth. "Here live the fiddler crabs," said Merla, "but we must have taken them by surprise, it is so quiet." Even as she spoke, there was a stirring and scrambling among the rocks, and soon scores of light green crabs were gathered before the visitors. The crabs bore fiddles of all sorts and shapes in their claws, and one big fellow carried a leader's baton. The latter crab climbed upon a flat rock and in an excited voice called out, "Ready now, ready, good fiddlers. We'll play number 19, 'Hail to the Mermaids.' Ready, take aim, fire away!" At this command, every crab began scraping at his fiddle as hard as he could, and the sounds were so shrill and unmusical that Trot wondered when they would begin to play a tune. But they never did. It was one regular mix-up of sounds from beginning to end. When the noise finally stopped, the leader turned to his visitors and, waving his baton toward them, asked, "Well, what do you think of that?" "Not much," said Trot honestly. "What's it all about?" "I composed it myself," said the fiddler crab, "but it's highly classical, I admit. All really great music is an acquired taste." "I don't like it," remarked Cap'n Bill. "It might do all right to stir up a racket New Year's Eve, but to call that screechin' music!" Just then the crabs started fiddling again, harder than ever, and as it promised to be a long performance, they left the little creatures scraping away at their fiddles as if for dear life, and swam along the rocky canyon until, on turning a corner, they came upon a new and different scene. There were crabs here, too, many of them, and they were performing the queerest antics imaginable. Some were building themselves into a pyramid, each standing on edge with the biggest and strongest ones at the bottom. When the crabs were 5 or 6 rows high, they would all tumble over, still clinging to one another, and, having reached the ground, they would separate and commence to build the pyramid over again. Others were chasing one another around in a circle, always moving backward or sideways and trying to play leapfrog as they went. Still others were swinging on slight branches of seaweed or turning cartwheels or indulging in similar antics. Merla and the Earth People watched the busy little creatures for some time before they were themselves observed. But finally Trot gave a laugh when one crab fell on its back and began frantically waving its legs to get right side up again. At the sound of her laughter, they all stopped their play and came toward the visitors in a flock, looking up at them with their bright eyes in the most comical way. "Welcome home!" cried one as he turned a back somersault and knocked another crab over. "What's the difference between a mermaid and a tadpole?" asked another in a loud voice, and without a pause continued, "Why, one drops its tail and the other holds on to it. Ha ha! Ho! Hee hee!" "These," said Merla, "are the clown crabs. They are very silly things, as you may already have discovered, but for a short time they are rather amusing. One tires of them very soon." "They're funny," said Trot, laughing again. "It's almost as good as a circus. I don't think they would make me tired, but then, I'm not a mermaid." The clown crabs had now formed a row in front of them. "Mr. Johnsing," asked one, "why is a mermaid like an automobile?" "I don't know, Tommy Blimken," asked a big crab in the middle of the row. "Why do you think a mermaid is like an automobile?" "Because they both get tired," said Tommy Blimken. Then all the crabs laughed, and Tommy seemed to laugh louder than the rest. "How do the crabs in the sea know anything about automobiles?" asked Trot. "Why, Tommy Blimken and Harry Hustle were both captured once by humans and put in an aquarium," answered the mermaid. "But one day they climbed out and escaped, finally making their way back to the sea and home again. So they are quite traveled, you see, and great favorites among the crabs. While they were on land, they saw a great many curious things, and so, I suppose, they saw automobiles." We did!" cried Harry Hustle, an awkward crab with one big claw and one little one. "And we saw earth people with legs. Awfully funny they were. And animals called horses with legs, and other creatures with legs, and the people cover themselves with the queerest things. They even wear feathers and flowers on their heads, and—" "Oh, we know all about that," said Trot. "We live on the earth ourselves." "Well, you are lucky to get off from it and into the good water," said the crab.